Property taxes. You know them, nobody loves them, yet we're stuck paying them all the same. A while back, I did a video all on property taxes in California now that Proposition 19 has been implemented, and we were finally able to see how the various county assessors' offices were going to drive up your property taxes. As a reminder, Prop 19 passed in 2020 and went into effect February of 2021. It kept Prop 13's limit on the increase of your property taxes per year to a maximum of 2%, and also kept the ability for parents and their children to transfer property back and forth without those property taxes being reassessed and thus increased. However, Prop 19 only allows us to avoid this reassessment so long as the property is the principal residence of both the parent and at least one of the receiving children. If that's not the case, then property taxes get reassessed. Obviously, this has had massive impacts on properties received as an inheritance. Children are more likely to sell the property after parents pass away. Well, today, we're finally jumping into a topic that a lot of folks have been asking about ever since Prop 19 came along and made inheriting investment properties a whole lot more expensive, and that is the Family LLC strategy. A potential way for us to transfer property down to children while avoiding a reassessment of the property taxes. But what some would call a smart strategy, others online like to call a loophole. But before you start thinking this is some magic trick to escape property taxes, let me say this up front. There are no guarantees, and you absolutely should not try this without a qualified attorney. Seriously, please don't. You could easily mess it up and cost your family tens of thousands of dollars, and that's just in the first year alone. That said, let's go over the high-level process and why people are interested in this strategy. Hit the like button, be sure to subscribe to learn all the secrets of generational wealth, and let's dive in. So, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Well, before Prop 19, you could transfer a rental property from parent to child, no problem, no reassessment. Property taxes stayed the same. Now, well, unless your primary residence and your kid actually moves in, the county's going to reassess that property's value to market rate, and that tax bill, it's going to skyrocket. So if mom and dad bought a rental back in the 70s for $80,000 and you inherit it today and it's worth $800,000, your tax bill just ballooned. Think going from $850 a year to $12,000 a year overnight. Naturally, people look for a workaround, enter the Family LLC. This strategy has been around since pre-Prop 19, but it was not generally used unless you had multiple properties, very expensive properties, or a combination of the two. Now, since we can only avoid a reassessment on one property, and even then, only so long as both the parent and the child live there, the Family LLC has started to become more attractive. Here's a quick step-by-step on how it works, in theory. Number one, create an LLC. Mom and dad form an LLC, let's say California Properties LLC. Next, they transfer the property into the LLC that the parents own 100%. Then, over time, or even all at once, the parents gradually give portions of the LLC to their kids, but they never cross the magic threshold. As long as no more than 50% of ownership changes hands, there's no reassessment of the underlying real property in the LLC. Then, after a period of time, preferably more than a year, the property is moved out of that LLC and into the hands of the parents at 50% and the kids at 50%. A new LLC is then established that is owned by the parents and children, 50-50, where they transfer the property into the second LLC. Finally, parents give their 50% of the second LLC to their children, so they end up with a 100% ownership of the second LLC, and thus a 100% ownership of the real property held within that second LLC. At that point, they continue to keep it there or take it out if they want. Seems simple, right? Of course not. This is California. We've got rules, exceptions to those rules, and exceptions to the exceptions. But let's pause here for a second and point out this can absolutely backfire if it's not done correctly. There are three big principles to keep in mind. First is that the ownership interest in the real property must match on each side of each transaction. If Adam owns a property 100% and transfers it to an LLC where Adam is only a 1/3 owner, that's a transfer where the ownership interest is not the same on each side, therefore a reassessment of the property. However, if Adam transfers the property to his own LLC, well, then no reassessment. He owns 100% of the property outside the LLC and 100% of the property and thus everything in it. It's the same ownership on each side of that transaction. The next principle is if more than 50% of the ownership of an LLC changes hands, then reassessment of the underlying real property. 49%, no reassessment. 50% exactly, no reassessment. 50.01% changes hands, reassessment of the whole property. This doesn't even need to happen all in one go. If you transferred 45% ownership now and another 10% in 5 years, then reassessment of the underlying property once you moved that 10%, meaning 55% in total ownership was transferred. How does the county find out you transferred more than 50% of the LLC? Well, they're going to ask for proof of who the owners of the LLC are when you move the property out of the LLC, either as a result of a gift, dissolution of the LLC, or a sale of the property. And if they find out you moved that 10% a few years back, get ready to owe back property taxes dating back to when you moved that 10% in our example. And the last principle to keep in mind is the timing of this all. If you were to try all the steps I outlined in the process all at once, the county is just going to flatten the whole process, call it one single transaction, and reassess the property taxes completely as of now. There are 3 different tests the government can run to counteract people doing all this just to avoid property taxes, but I'll talk about all of those in another video. But the question is, can it work? Well, the answer is yes, if done properly. With proper planning, correct pacing of ownership transfers, and careful documentation, some families have been successful in passing investment property to the next generation without getting hammered by new property taxes. It's especially effective if you have multiple kids and you spread out the transfers over time, staying under that 50% threshold, of course. But even then, the county assessor might interpret things differently from one county to the next. Orange County might say no problem. LA County probably will say nope. It's a bit of a gamble. And to put it mildly, at the end of the day, the sole reason to go through the process cannot be simply to avoid a property tax reassessment, because that's just not going to fly. Now, here's the kicker. Just because you're trying to avoid a property tax reassessment doesn't mean you've avoided all taxes. Depending on how you do this, 1, you could lose the step-up in basis at death. 2, you could accidentally trigger gift tax consequences. And 3, your family will end up paying more in capital gains taxes down the line. Like I said, this is not something you DIY off a Reddit thread or some lawyer who thinks people want to hear him yap all day on YouTube. Wait. So, is the Family LLC strategy a silver bullet? No, but it can be a useful tool in the right hands with the right facts. Just make sure you go into this with your eyes open, with professional guidance, and with goals beyond just tax avoidance. Because if that's your sole motivation, the state's going to sniff that out faster than you can say reassessment. Now, I'll be doing a much deeper dive into the Family LLC strategy in an upcoming longer video where we'll break down the specific legal mechanics, tax code sections, examples, and all the nerdy details. But for now, that's your quick overview. And as always, if you found this video helpful, like, subscribe, comment down below how much you love paying property taxes, and share this with that buddy of yours who has a rental property of their own. I'm attorney Andrew Bethel, and I'll see you at our next meeting.